Summary of the Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy. When Ivan's friends and colleagues at the courthouse hear that Judge Ivan Ilyich Golovin has died, they think about how they might gain from his death. Pyotr Ivanovich, who has known Ivan Ilyich for a long time, realizes that he might be able to help his brother-in-law move because of the new opening, and Fyodor Vasilyevich dreams of getting a raise. But none of the men say these things out loud. Instead, they talk about how sad they are that Ivan finally died after a long, terrible illness. Ivan Ilyich's friends don't just think about the job chances that have opened up because of his death. They also think about death and are glad they didn't die. Still, Pyotr Ivanovich feels uneasy when he goes to Ivan's wake and hears about his friend's pain. Not only does this make him feel bad for Ivan, but it also tells him that he, too, will die someday. But this thought is still vague, and he is able to get rid of it by thinking about playing cards after the funeral. When he first walks into the ceremony and sees all the sad faces and crying family members, he feels sad. But then he sees a coworker named Schwartz, who winks at him and smiles in a way that doesn't show much emotion, as if he doesn't want the sad event to get in the way of his plans to organize a game of whist that night. Before Pyotr Ivanovich can leave the funeral, though, Ivan's wife, Praskovia Fyodorovna Golovina, takes him by the arm and leads him into the sitting room, where she tells him about Ivan's long, horrible death. As she talks, Pyotr sees that she only talks about her husband's suffering in terms of how it affected her. She then asks him to help her get as much money as possible from the government after he died. When Pyotr finally says that he doesn't know how to help her, they go back to the service, and Pyotr leaves as soon as he can to play whist with Schwartz for the rest of the evening. Ivan Ilyich's story of his death is one of pain, misery, and a slow fall. As a young man, he goes to law school and uses his father's good name to his advantage. But while he's in school, he starts to do things that disgust him, like waste money, drink too much, and have casual sex. These things make him feel like he's about to start a bad life. Over time, though, he realizes that his bosses also let him do these things, so he stops wondering if he's living a good life or not. Instead, he focuses on his work and social standing by dressing well and taking a job as the governor's assistant. During this time, he works hard and gains some social skills, which helps him become an examining judge. He loves the new power he has in this role and thinks it's enough to just know he has it, even if he doesn't use it. In court, he learns how to put aside unimportant things and look at each case with an open mind and no feelings. He meets Praskovia quickly, and he thinks she is beautiful and charming. Even though he hasn't given marriage much thought, he thinks that she's a decent catch and that he might as well marry her. Praskovia and Ivan start to fight around the time she finds out she is pregnant. From this point on, Ivan doesn't like being married, so he works even harder at his job. As he and Praskovia have more children, he becomes more interested in his job because it gives him a way to escape the troubles at home. These troubles come up often and in large amounts as several of their children die and his relationship with Praskovia loses its charm. When Ivan and Praskovia start to fight, he runs away and spends the evenings reading papers. Even though he works hard, his work life starts to get worse when he doesn't get a raise for several years in a row. This makes him very angry, so he chooses to talk to his bosses and tell them that they should have given him more. On his way to do this, though, he finds out that the ministry as a whole is about to go through big changes, and he manages to put himself in a position to get a raise when this happens. Ivan moves his family to Petersburg before he starts his new job, because he wants to set up their flat before he starts. He spends a lot of money to decorate the living space. One day, he falls while hanging curtains and hurts his side, but he doesn't think much of it. Instead, he focuses on setting up his house and making Praskovia happy, which makes her happy when she and their children finally arrive. In this new part of their lives, they have respected people over, have nice parties, and live a happy life, even though Ivan sometimes has a strange taste in his mouth and a pain in his side that is getting worse. Soon, though, these signs will change his mood and make him fight with Praskovia over the smallest things. So, she tells Ivan he needs to see a doctor, and he agrees, even though he doesn't like being examined by an expert. He thinks the doctor treats him the same way he treats guilty people in court. During the meeting, the doctor talks about his kidney and blind gut, saying that they will need to do a number of tests to figure out what's wrong with him. Ivan wants to get right to the point, so he asks the doctor if this situation is life-threatening. The doctor ignores him and keeps talking in a confusing way. At the end of the meeting, Ivan asks the doctor one last time if he's going to die. The doctor just looks at him and says that he's already told Ivan what he thinks. Ivan goes to see other doctors because he is upset. But his symptoms get worse no matter what they say or what he does. He even tries holistic medicine and, later, mystical practices for a short time, but they don't work any better than the traditional ways, so he gives them up and decides to do whatever his doctor tells him to do. Even though he is sick, Praskovia and Liza, their grown-up daughter, go on with their lives as if it isn't that important. Even Ivan tries to ignore his illness, but he can't because the pain and strange taste in his mouth keep him from doing the things he used to love, like being a judge or playing whist. As time goes on, he gets thin and weak, like a shell of the man he used to be. When he realizes that his condition is getting worse, he starts to think that his doctors are stupid for focusing on his kidney and blind gut, thinking that they are missing the most important thing, that he is going to die soon. When he thinks about it this way, he realizes that he has never let himself believe that he would die. Even though he's always known that everyone dies, he's never thought about it in his own case because he's been too focused on his own life to think about how it ends. Now, though, he realizes that he was wrong to think this way, and this makes him wonder what life is all about. He wants to know what this is all about. Ivan tries to get away from this thought by thinking about the things that used to make him feel better, but his work and image don't help him anymore because he is in so much pain. No matter how hard he tries to tell himself that his work has given his life meaning, he can't help but think that only his pain is real and that everything else he is focused on is nothing compared to this terrible, unavoidable pain. In this state of mind, he gets sicker and has to stay in bed in a small room. There, doctors, his wife, and workers like Gerasim, a young peasant who helps him out of the goodness of his heart, visit him. Ivan gets very angry at Praskovia and Liza because they don't seem to fully understand his situation. He thinks this is because they don't want to understand, because they don't want to think about the end of their own lives. Gerasim, on the other hand, knows that everyone dies, so he feels sorry for Ivan and does everything he can to make him comfortable. He even lets Ivan prop his legs up on his shoulders for hours at a time because this helps Ivan's pain a little. Ivan gets checked out by doctors from time to time, but he doesn't like them because he knows they won't tell him they can't save him. So, he thinks they're spreading a lie that everyone seems to believe, which is shown by the fact that Praskovia and Liza won't show him that they think he's going to die. One night, before going to the opera, they go into his room to talk about it. As they talk, they notice that he is looking at them with clear hate. Since then, Ivan has been afraid of Praskovia's touch and hates it when she walks into a room. As Ivan's health gets worse, he complains that God doesn't seem to exist. Then, he thinks about his childhood until he feels like he can only live in the past. He starts to wonder if he's lived his life wrongly because of this, but he tells himself that he's always done everything properly. Still, he can't stop questioning his choices and way of life, having a conversation with a voice deep inside him. When he asks this voice why there is so much pain, it tells him it's just there. It doesn't serve any purpose. As his pain gets worse, he thinks that things have been getting worse and worse ever since his youth, when there was still some light in his life. He then realizes that he has lived wrong, but he doesn't know what he should have done or why he has to suffer. When he looks at his family, he sees that they represent everything he used to believe in and all the shallow things he has spent his life on. Ivan agrees to take communion in the days before he dies. This makes him feel a little better. But when Praskovia asks if he is getting better because of this, and he says yes, he falls back into sadness because he knows this is a lie. He then starts to scream in pain and doesn't stop until 3 days later, when he dies. On the last day, he flails his arms and touches his son Vasya's head, and Vazhia kisses his fingers. Just then, Ivan feels like he's falling through a hole and sees a light. He realizes that his life wasn't how it should have been, but he can still make it right. When he looks at his son and other family members, he realizes that his pain hurts them. He tries to say, "Forgive me," but the words come out as, "For goodness." Still, he tells himself he who needs to will get it. Shortly after that, his pain goes away. Even when it comes back, he doesn't care because he knows it's the end of his life, but instead of death, he sees light. Ivan tells himself, death is gone, and then he himself is gone.
About the author. Tolstoy was born to rich Russian aristocrats. He was the fourth of their 5 children. Both of Tolstoy's parents died when he was young. After that, he and his brothers were raised by relatives on the family estate, Yasnaya Polyana. Tolstoy studied law at Kazan University when he was young, but he wasn't a good student and soon dropped out. As a young aristocrat, Tolstoy worked to make serfs' lives better and spoke out for their rights. Tolstoy soon joined the army and started writing. In 1852, he put out his first book, Childhood. Afterward, he became an artillery officer and served in the Crimean War. There, he was known for his bravery and rose to the rank of second lieutenant because of it. After the war, Tolstoy spent a lot of time traveling around Europe. In 1862, he went back to Yasnaya Polyana to marry Sofia Andreevna Bears. Between 1863 and 1888, Tolstoy and Bears had 13 children. During this time, Tolstoy wrote most of his big works, like War and Peace. In the 1870s, Tolstoy had a moral crisis and a spiritual awakening. After that, he called himself a Christian anarchist and pacifist, rejected all material wealth, and devoted his life to the non-violent struggle against the state and Russian autocracy. Tolstoy's radical, outspoken beliefs and his desire to give away all of his money and fortune hurt his marriage. Bears didn't agree with many of Tolstoy's political and religious ideas, and she got tired of the many spiritual followers he brought to their farm. In 1910, when Tolstoy and his wife were no longer together, he took his daughter Alexandra on a trip. The trip was too much for Tolstoy, who was already sick and old. He died of pneumonia in Ostapovo, Russia, at the age of 82.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.